The Last Musketeer, Chapter 9. "This is the ugliest building I've ever seen," Greg announced. "Of course it is," Aramis replied. "Ugliness is fear," Athos added. Greg decided not to ask what he meant. He realised now more than ever that it was best to focus on the positives, just as he'd been trying to do even before he'd been sucked through a giant painting back in time. And right now, things were looking up. For one, he had now befriended 2 of the musketeers. For another, he was outside of the city. It was a beautiful afternoon. The 3 boys stood on the bank of the Seine, a half-mile east of Paris, in a pleasant countryside of rolling hills and serene fields. Upriver from the city, the water of the Seine was so clear Greg could see trout swimming along the bottom. But La Mort Triste was a blight on the landscape. A dark, squat lump, perched on an island in the middle of the river. To Greg it looked like a giant cinder block with turrets. "Any mason worth his salt is working on the Louvre," Aramis explained, "or a cathedral or a chateau for some noble. No one wants to build a prison. Though, as you can see, the designer did incorporate the latest in prison technology into the design." "What's that?" Greg asked. Aramis turned to him, surprised. "Why, the river, of course. Even if someone managed to break out of their cell and scale the walls, they'd drown." "Unless they could swim," Greg countered. Both boys burst out laughing. "What?" Greg mumbled, embarrassed. "Who can swim other than characters from Roman myths?" Athos asked. Greg shrugged. "I can." Athos stared at Greg as though he'd said he could fly. "I've never met anyone who could swim. That's why they built the prison on that god-forsaken island in the first place. That's why they put moats around castles." "How on earth do you know how to swim?" Everyone I know back home can do it." Aramis shook his head. "Artagnan must be an amazing place. You can all swim. You have more planets than we do. Next thing I know, you'll tell me you can cook a meal in less than a day." Greg decided not to reply to that. "That's really why they built the prison there?" "One of the reasons," Aramis said. "It's also easier to get rid of the dead bodies when you can just dump them in the river, and it keeps all the diseases away from the city." Greg swallowed hard. "What disease?" "Oh, the plague, mostly," Aramis replied. "Leprosy, too. Just about everyone who goes in there gets sick. The Lord doesn't care for sinners." "They're not getting sick because God is angry at them," Greg objected. "The conditions in the prison make them sick." "That's what they say in Artagnan, is it?" Aramis asked. Greg realised there was no point in arguing. It didn't matter what anyone believed about disease. Consignment to La Mort was a death sentence. Worse, Greg could see why the prison had a reputation for being impenetrable. There were no windows and only one door, a huge slab of oak right in front of the lone dock, flanked by 2 guards. Then there were the guards on the roof, shuttling along parapets between the turrets at each corner. With so many men on patrol, there was no way to approach the prison without being seen. "If I had my brigade, I could get in there," Athos remarked wistfully. Aramis sniffed. "Someone like you will never command a brigade." Greg turned from the prison and frowned. "What did you just say?" "This Athos is from a lower class," Aramis replied simply. "Not educated." "So what?" Greg heard himself snap. "Why shouldn't Athos be able to lead a brigade? Shouldn't the best soldier be given that job? What about the clown we found at the Hôtel de Ville? Is it better to have someone who just bought the position?" "Exactly my point," Athos chimed in. "My commander was a clown." "You don't know that," Aramis said to Greg, pointing at Athos. "You're only taking his word for it." "My word has nothing to do with it," Athos argued. "The man's incompetence was a fact. He barely knew which end of a sword to hold." "I'm sure he was better than that," Aramis said. "No nobleman could be that incompetent." "Why?" Athos challenged. "Simply because he's a nobleman?" "Yes," Aramis replied. Athos snorted. So then you actually believe that all nobles are simply better than we are because they happen to be born above us? I didn't create the world. The Lord did, Aramis stated. You didn't answer the question, Athos taunted. Aramis glared at him hotly. This is a dangerous line of thought. Once you start questioning the right of anyone to be above you, when does it stop? Do you believe the king himself is no better than any one of us? Athos paused. Perhaps he isn't. Aramis gasped in shock, and then turned to Greg. We shouldn't be in league with this boy. He doesn't think properly. Greg squinted in disbelief at the cleric. You honestly never asked yourself why the king gets to be king and not you? Never, Aramis said. Not even for a second, Greg prodded. Aramis didn't answer right away. For a moment there appeared to be a flicker of doubt behind his eyes, but he took a deep breath and shook his head. This is the way of the world. We are all born to our station in life. Can you imagine what would happen if we weren't? If we could all simply do whatever we wanted, it would be chaos. Not necessarily, Greg said earnestly. It would, Aramis said, as though it were a proven fact. We all have our role to play. The king was born king. My brother was born first, not I. I can't change either of these things any more than a cow can try to become a person. I notice it's always the people on the top of the class system who say that, Athos mused, not the people on the bottom. I'm not on the top of the class system, Aramis protested. Well, you're higher up than me, Athos snapped. Greg stood between them. Enough! We'll never save my parents if we can't work as a team. The boys glared at each other over Greg's shoulder, but remained silent. I fear this is a hopeless mission, Aramis said with a sigh, turning back to the prison. It's protected by at least 20 men. I can defeat 20 men, Athos said with a smile. I did it before lunch today. In a crowded marketplace, Aramis countered. These soldiers have the advantage of high ground and open water. They could kill you 100 times before you even got to the island. Then we'll just have to figure out a way for me to get to that island without being seen, Athos said. And what then? Aramis asked. How will you find Greg's parents? The prison is rumoured to be a labyrinth inside. Athos considered this and said, We'll have to talk to someone who's been inside La Morte. Ha! Aramis barked. Good luck with that. Anyone who goes inside La Morte either comes out to be hanged or comes out as a corpse. I wasn't thinking of a prisoner, said Athos. Fine, but its guards have all sworn not to reveal details of the prison's construction under penalty of death, Aramis stated. Athos shrugged. I wasn't thinking of a guard either. Then who? Greg asked. Athos's green eyes danced. Someone I haven't met, but have heard of more than once. His name is Porthos. He's not only been inside La Morte, he's lived to tell the tale.